Mr. Muscle Shark himself, Sean Sherk, former UFC lightweight champion. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for taking out the time to speak with me.
You
Now,
bet.
you closed out a highly competitive career with an outstanding record of 36-4-1, which is actually one of the best records you will ever find in elite MMA. What have you been up to? What have you been up to since hanging up the gloves?
Well, first of all, Sherdog has my record wrong. I'm actually 38-4-1.
Ooh.
So the couple fights on there that weren't processed through Sherdog for whatever reason. So what am I up to now? Well, I own a real estate investment firm. I buy, sell, rehab, flip houses, basically, long story short. So I started doing that about 6 years ago. And that's what takes up the majority of my time now.
Okay, I dig it. Now, I mean, you walked away from the sport on a win, and that is it was over the recently retired Evan Dunham, UFC 119 back in 2010. How hard is it to walk away from the sport on an actual victory?
Well, ultimately, that was the game plan. I said many years before I retired that I was going to retire on a high note. I did not want to retire after a string of losses and be cut by the UFC or be told by the UFC it's time to retire. So my game plan was to retire on a high note and, just kind of ride off into the sunset, I guess. So that was all planned from the beginning, and I wasn't initially planning on retiring after the Dunham fight. I planned on fighting again, but I just had such a string of injuries, one after another, and they never healed. Even the ones I had surgery on, they never healed properly. So by the end of my career, when I fought Dunham, I think I was 38 years old. I was fighting at 75%, best case scenario. Both of my hips were torn. I had multiple bulge discs in my back, separated rib, torn knee, 2 torn shoulders, bulge disc in my neck.
Wow.
The list goes on and on and on. So, when I was plus 38 years old fighting a guy that was 28, after that fight was over, I had to take a step back and just really gauge where I wanted to be at this point in time and see if I could heal those injuries and get back in there and compete at a high level without jeopardizing what I spent my whole career trying to accomplish.
Right. I understand that. Absolutely. I have to ask, do you ever get that itch to kind of get back in there and fight again? I mean, I'm sure you still follow the sport.
Yeah, I get the itch all the time. I would say initially it was daily, and as time goes on, the itch becomes less and less. But I do get the itch. Anytime I watch any kind of mixed martial arts fight, I get the itch. Anytime I see anything on the internet, I get the itch. When I'm training with my kids, I get the itch. Me and my youngest boy were just downstairs actually this morning training jiu-jitsu because he wants to start learning a lot of submission flows. So I like to pass that knowledge along to him. So of course I get the itch. And it just happens a lot. It's just part of the deal. When you surround your life, when something like that takes such a big toll on your life,
right,
it's hard. You're never going to be able to just walk away from it and say, okay, I'm done, and not think about it anymore. It's always going to be on the back of your mind.
Yeah, well, if your son wanted to pursue a career in mixed martial arts, would you kind of steer him away from that, or I mean, all the injuries you had, or is that something you would get behind and support?
Yeah, I mean, I would steer him towards it 100%. My youngest, he wants to be a professional fighter someday, and
oh, wow.
Right now, I mean, he wrestles a lot and he does very well, and that helps with my itch as well. Just having him and being able to train him and coach him and pass along my knowledge and still be a part of it, even though I'm on the sidelines. Having your son out there and watching him compete, it's pretty darn exciting. So as of right now, he says he wants to do it. And I'm all for it. If that's what he wants to do, I'd love to be his coach and give him everything I have. And maybe someday we could be the first father-son UFC champions.
That's pretty awesome. I like that. I definitely like that. Some mini muscle sharks looming.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, let's get to this whole Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov situation. UFC 299. Khabib Nurmagomedov chokes out Conor McGregor. Well, it's really more of a neck crank in the 4th round before hopping outside of the cage, attacking Dylan Dennis, who is Conor's BJJ coach. Before we talk about the fight itself, I kind of wanted to get your take on the brawl because, I mean, you had to deal with guys like BJ Penn in your face talking all sorts of craziness.
Yep.
But like it never really went to that sort of extreme. So, I mean, what is your take on the brawl? Do you think it's kind of a black eye on the sport, or you think it's not that bad, or?
You know, realistically, I never watched the fight. I don't watch fights too often. Of course, it's hard to be on any kind of social media and not see or hear about what took place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in Khabib's defense, he just was a man that was pushed over the edge. As far as I know, he's never acted like that in the past. And I could be wrong about that, but as far as I know, I don't think he's ever lashed out like that in the past. And I think he was just a man that was pushed over the edge.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you talk about somebody's father and their family and their religion and their country, you know, there's certain things that I think go above and beyond trying to build a fight. And, you know, Conor McGregor is a master of pushing people over the edge.
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of what makes him successful, because he's able to push people over the edge to the point where it actually makes them less of a threat, in my opinion. Because when you're fighting somebody angry, that takes away your thought process, it takes away your game planning ability, it takes away your ability to evolve as a fight progresses, because you're fighting with anger, and the anger takes over your better senses, so to speak. So that's what he's a master of. And with somebody like Khabib, it did not work in his favor. I think that was I think it actually pissed him off to the point where it made him more of a dangerous threat. Again, just my opinion. So as far as what took place after that, I can't I can't say I condone it. But on the other hand, I can't say I blame him. You know, I've been in his situation before. You know, like when I fought BJ, I had to put up with a lot of adversity that still to this day gets under my skin.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't as bad, I don't think. You know, I don't think BJ pushed the same buttons as Conor pushed. Right. And if he would have, and plus I lost the fight, so I mean, you know. It is what it is, I guess. You just kind of take it. If they do have a rematch, I think it'll be incredible. But Conor McGregor has to make some changes in order to justify that.
Well, let's talk about that. So I saw on Facebook you had posted a note to Conor McGregor, and you mentioned how your style and Khabib's style are very similar with the way you go about, you know, just kind of taking it to your opponent, using your wrestling, using your physicality to get on top, rain down some brutal ground and pound. And I mean, there's a lot of similarities. They really do mirror each other a lot. And you offered up your services to him. Do you want to kind of elaborate on the ways that you think teaching your style can actually help Conor if there is a potential rematch?
Yeah. You know, and what I was thinking, you know, in my head is that, you know, it would, in order to justify a rematch, you know, some things would have to take place differently. You know, I would suggest maybe a different change in lifestyle. Throw down the antics and get back to the basics. You know, where did you begin and how did you get to where you are now? You know, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
As far as stylistically, yeah, my style does mimic a lot of Khabib's. Or actually, you could say Khabib's style mimics mine since it was my style first.
Very fair.
But
very fair.
But you know, he's a grinder. He's tough as nails. He's got phenomenal wrestling. You know, conditioning for days. Strong. You know, the whole 9 yards. So in order to beat somebody like him, you have to be able to have somebody in the gym that can mimic that, and you have to feel that on a daily basis. So the more you feel that, the more you start to learn how to deal with it and how to counter the kinds of stuff that they do. And, you know, I like just based on my style, you know, I look at the kinds of things that stifled me the kinds of things that frustrated me, the kinds of things that worked against me, being that me and Khabib are so close in styles, you would probably want to train with somebody that not only can mimic his specific style, but then show you this is what worked against me. This was my Achilles heel. This is what made it difficult for me to take down this guy, this guy, this guy. This is what worked on the feet. This is what worked on the ground. This is what worked as far as escapes and submissions go. So just kind of break it down. Like I said, get back to the basics and just kind of start from scratch and break it down from the beginning and start over, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, I mean, you were such a force at lightweight that they went ahead and started opening up other divisions, you know, so guys like Kenny Florian could have a chance to do great things because, I mean, you really took when you were at the peak, it was like you couldn't just have technique, you couldn't just have physical conditioning. It's like you had to be technically sound, you had to have conditioning, and you had to have wrestling. And I mean, the more things change, the more they kind of stay the same because if you look at the majority of world champions right now in MMA, I mean, Henry Cejudo, wrestler, Daniel Cormier, wrestler, TJ Dillashaw, Khabib, Tyron Woodley. Look what Ryan Bader's doing over in Bellator. He's going for 2 belts. So, I mean, wrestling is still dominating MMA today. And I mean, what do you make of that? What do you make of wrestling still being the dominant force?
Yeah, I mean, we've said this for many, many years. The best base you could have as a mixed martial artist is wrestling. But if you look at every single one of these guys, they're not just wrestlers. Their base core is wrestling, and then they work their mixed martial arts around their wrestling. And that was my theory when I was fighting. Okay, I was born basically a wrestler, and I wrestled my whole life. So my core strength is my wrestling. So I was never willing to let that go. That was always going to be my core strength. But I started working my striking to benefit my wrestling. I started working my jiu-jitsu to benefit my wrestling. I started working my whole game revolved around my wrestling abilities. So I was able to keep my strength and work all these other attributes into my strength, not only making the wrestling better, but making the other attributes better as well, because now that wrestling's a big threat. So as far as you know, all those guys you mentioned, they're all 3-dimensional. You know, they're not just wrestlers. They're not going out there and just grounding and pounding and squeaking out decisions. You know, they're out there. They're knocking guys out. They're taking submissions. They're fighting on the feet. They're fighting on the ground. You know, they're all 3-dimensional. So wrestling, like I said, is a great base to have, but you still have to learn how to be a mixed martial artist.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question I want to ask you, primetime UFC lightweight champion Sean Sherk or Khabib Nurmagomedov, present day, who would take it?
Present day or in prime? I like in prime better.
Well, no. Primetime Sean Sherk versus present day Khabib.
I get it. Yeah. You know what? I mean, the fighter in me, I mean, realistically, I was trained to believe when I was the #1 guy in the world, the UFC champion, I was trained to believe that I could beat anybody in the world, and I still believe that. You know, so you take Khabib right now and me in my prime, you know, I believe I would have won that decision, or maybe not a decision, but you know, I believe I would have won that fight. But again, that's just me talking, and that's maybe I'm a little biased.
Yeah, it's just fun to think about. You know what I mean?
It is.
You both are respectfully dominant in a very similar yet still your own kind of ways.
Right.
Definitely fun to kind of think about.
I'll tell you what, it would have been a good fight because there wouldn't have been an ass in a chair for 25 straight minutes. You know, his style and my style. You know, we wouldn't rope a dope. We wouldn't be dancing around, and neither one of us would get tired. So you'd see a lot of action and a lot of fighting for positioning.
Oh yeah, that would be the dream fight to make in the fantasy world for sure. Well, before we get out of here, do you got anyone you want to give a shout out to, or any social media platforms you want to list out?
Yep. I mean, I don't really do a whole lot of social media stuff besides just post every now and then on Facebook. Otherwise, shout outs, Training Mask, one of my former companies. They've done nothing but good stuff for me, and they've really hit a worldwide stage as well. And that's about it.
Awesome. Well, former UFC lightweight champion Sean the Muscle Shark Sherk, Thank you so much for taking out the time to speak with me. I wish you the best of luck in all your future endeavors, and I hope to speak with you again soon.
All right. Thank you much.
Thanks, brother.
You bet. Bye.